a ticking time bomb. I started to feel like it's only a matter of time. If this pressure increases at all, I cannot withstand this. I used to think it was perversion. I used to think it was greed. I used to think it was rebellion. I used to think it was witchcraft, all these reasons that people end up sabotaging their life. Now I just realize it's just weariness, exhaustion, fear, anxiety, this feeling that I can't keep all these balls in the air at the same time. I'm going to screw this up. It's only a matter of time. And I didn't know what to do with some of those emotions.
Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. Did you know your brain is lying to you 80% of the time? Well, Judah Smith and Les Parrott talk about exactly that and why leaders self-sabotage, how to break the cycle. You know what? You got a lot of negative thoughts. 80% of human thoughts are negative, and I can relate to that. I don't know whether you can. I think you're going to love this. So wherever you're watching, be sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a comment to join the conversation. And now, a word from today's partners, and then we'll dive into my conversation with Judah Smith and Dr. Les Parrott. This episode is brought to you by Compassion. You know, church, if you are in scripture routinely, you're likely aware that there is a very major emphasis on compassion and generosity as core components of God's character and our lives as his followers. In fact, throughout the scripture, God describes himself as compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in love, aspects that describe his character and nature. And as believers, scripture calls us to reflect on that nature, living a full life of gospel-driven kindness that is set apart from, well, what we know to be the normal posture of this world. So as a pastor, the question is, how is that going for you? This summer, I'd like to encourage you to visit my friends at Compassion International to learn how you might grow your compassion and your generosity today. You can find out more at compassion.com/Carey. This is something I do personally because honestly, it's changed my life and it's changed my heart. So check it out. Go to compassion.com/Carey. That's compassion.com/CAREY. This episode is brought to you by Church Salary. So every church leader I know carries a heavy responsibility to honor their team by paying them fairly. But the question is, how do you know what's actually fair? So to talk about a new way to discover this, I've invited Brad Hill from Glue. Brad, what are you learning about this?
You know, Carey, for a long time, I think for too long, pastors and boards at churches, they really just haven't had a trustworthy place to go when it comes to fair compensation. And so our partners at Church Salary have been working to fix this. In fact, it's good we're talking now, they just launched a brand new version of their online tool. And what it does is it guides ministry leaders through many of the most challenging compensation questions that they're going to have.
So I've heard a little bit about this new Church Salary 3.0. So I'd love to know, Brad, what questions does this tool actually answer?
Yes. So 3.0, Church Salary 3.0 is all new, and it helps pastors and leaders answer things like, am I being paid fairly? Are we paying our team fairly? How should things like cost of living, education, experience affect compensation? And it's using real ministry-specific data to give you clarity and confidence.
Brad, that's so helpful. I know leaders really want to do the right thing when it comes to compensation and actually see where they're at compared to everybody else, but it's hard to figure it out. So if you want to figure that out, it's absolutely free. Go to churchsalary.com/Carey. That's churchsalary.com/Carey and get started for free today. Judah, Les, welcome. Really glad to have you.
Good to be with you, man.
Come on, I love you. This is a good group right here. We're gonna have some fun. It's obviously an honor to be here with such educated men. This is amazing.
It's really great to have you back, Judah, and great to have you for the first time, Les. I got to ask, how did you two meet?
Judah?
Well, here's the thing, Carey. I have a wife of 25 years, and she needed to be fixed. So I felt like Leslie could fix my wife because obviously in marriage, I've batted 1,000 and I just needed Chelsea to kind of get with the program. And ever since then, our marriage has gotten so much better. Come on, who am I fooling? No, I needed desperate help to make sure that my marriage went the direction I wanted to go and didn't end up making some dumb decision that ruined everything I loved. And we went to Leslie, and Leslie a decade and a half ago or something, and it's been amazing. I've grown in adoration and admiration for them both, but mostly for Mrs. Leslie Parrott.
Yeah, Mrs. Doctor to you, Judah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you the truth, Carey. This because I really appreciate this about Chelsea and Judah. They came to Leslie and me about 15 years ago, as Judah said, for not a crisis, not because there was some huge thing that needed to be uncovered, not because they were falling apart at the seams, but because things were going well. And they wanted to make sure they stayed that way. That's really rare as a psychologist. My wife is a marriage and family therapist. We see a lot of people in Christian leadership. And I don't know that I've ever had anyone else show up knocking on our counseling door to say, hey, help us solve problems before they start. And Judah, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm imagining, looking back on that 15 years ago, you saw a lot of folks that were fallen, people, your peers, your friends that were stumbling in their efforts. And you said, man, what can we do? Let's take out some insurance to make sure that doesn't happen to us. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's pretty basic. I think I was kind of scared. I was like, man, there's no reason why that can't happen to me. And in some cases, it was people that were struggling making dumb decisions that I thought were much more informed and brilliant and more spiritual than I was. So I was like, well, I don't got a chance here if we don't kind of get to the bottom of some of this stuff and really uncover what's really going on. And so I am happy to announce that. In fact, I'm days away from getting away with my wife to some of our favorite parts of the world, and I am more in love with her than ever. So, thanks to the Parrots.
Well, and Carey, here's the issue. What I didn't realize is that Judah, after we did some work together with the four of us, Leslie and Chelsea and Judah and myself, that he would stand up in his on his platform in his microphone and go, hey, we're seeing Leslie Parrott. And he was modeling it, which was fantastic. The only problem for me is that everybody in his congregation started to call Leslie and me for counseling. And
we want therapy too.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it really was a pretty good model for how to I'm sure we're going to talk more about this, but in leadership, how in the world do you balance having the need for something like therapy with being in a leadership role and modeling that so that you're not ministering out of hurt, but out of redemption, out of health. And so anyway, that's how we first got together. And I think, Judah, it's kind of morphed a little bit into you and me doing a little bit of coaching here and vice versa. And it's really a mutually beneficial relationship at this point.
Truly.
Two things that kind of resonate with my story. My most recent round of counseling has been with a counselor / coach, and it was exactly what you said. Now, it wasn't couples therapy, but I was in a pretty happy place, and I'm like, I just see so many people imploding and exploding in ministry. How do I know that I'm not next? And there was nothing wrong, but like I dialed him in and I said, I haven't got a crisis I'm sitting on or thing that's exploding or imploding, but I just want to know, how does this happen? And it's been like a multi-year exploration of that and some of the other challenges I've had. So I totally get that. And I think that's, because usually we wait, right? You show up for financial counseling the day before bankruptcy. Probably should have been here a minute before, a little bit earlier. The other thing is my very first visit to a counselor was over 20 years ago, maybe 22, 23 years ago, where I went to fix my wife, Tony, who has nothing wrong with her. But apparently everything was wrong with me. And so I'm still in therapy 2 decades later because I am the problem. I've learned. So anyway,
I'll tell you this. Here's something that we know from research, and that is that most couples don't come to get the help that they need for 7 years on average. In other words, they will put up with a problem for 7 years before one of them finally goes, okay, I'll go, Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
I feel that resistance though. Like I really do.
Yeah.
I feel a resistance. It's like, and the older I get, the more I'm like, have I not figured this out by now? And apparently I have not. I don't know. How do you feel? Like, have you ever felt a resistance, Judah?
I've I've got it figured out, Carey, and I think that's the point. So I'd like to speak for my resistance.
So
Are
just
you
speak for
kidding
everybody
me?
who's got it figured out, please.
Like, it depends on what hour of the day. Like, we got in a fight a couple days ago, and Chelsea was like, so her new thing in our marriage is like, you've got to let me express my emotion. Okay. So we're getting older and we're starting to realize that she like is the stable, like consistent one. And I'm like the just combustible ball of emotion that's always, bursting. And she's like, hey, listen, what I need from you going forward, and this happened in therapy, I need you to give me space for emotion. So fast forward 2 days later, and she's like sharing frustration because she can't. There's some clothes that I was supposed to bring on this last trip we went on to do some speaking, and I didn't bring the clothes. And Carey, as God is my witness, I told myself, let her just express her emotion. It's not the end of the world. And 5 minutes later, I'm frustrated. I'm expressing, and she's saying it all over again. This is always what happens. You give me no space. I'm not disappointed in you. I'm simply sharing emotion. And she wanted to sleep in separate rooms. I don't want to get into the details, but yes, resistance. Yeah, it depends on what time of day it is. And it's humiliating to say that. But at the same time, it is kind of why we wrote this book, and I can get into more of that because there's a big impetus. This is a passion project for a number of reasons, but a lot of it is because of my own resistance to getting the help that I need. And in some cases, God clearly provides.
Yeah. I want to ask you both this question in turn. Judah, I'll start with you, but you and I have talked before publicly, privately about the pressures of ministry. And, Les, I want to get your take on that in a couple of minutes, but how have the pressures showed up in your life, in your ministry, in your marriage? Sometimes I think ministry is like when you've been there, you feel and you see the pressure. So how has that shown up in your life?
I think it has felt like delaying the inevitable, a ticking time bomb. I started to feel like it's only a matter of time. If this pressure increases at all, I cannot withstand this. I used to think, Carey, that preachers and leaders, some like me, some with much larger scale and platform and influence than I've ever had, I used to think it was perversion. I used to think it was greed. I used to think it was rebellion. I used to think it was witchcraft, all these reasons that people end up sabotaging their life. Now I just realize it's just weariness, exhaustion, fear, anxiety, this feeling that I can't keep all these balls in the air at the same time. I'm going to screw this up. It's only a matter of time. And I didn't know what to do with some of those emotions. And it only compounds when all of a sudden you've got buddies doing the same thing and you're starting to wonder, are you okay? And they're telling you they're okay, only to find out they haven't been okay the whole time and they've been lying to you. So then your brain plays tricks on you and you start to think like, oh my goodness. And then, if you're in the line of work that I chose, it's the people business, which is I'm honored that it is. But all of a sudden I'm thinking I'm going to hurt people I love. This is crazy. And that mindset settles in over your life like a dark cloud. And I'm telling you, you can't get another weather pattern or another weather system with all that you do. And you've got to get some help beyond you. I needed some objectivity. I needed someone who wasn't on my staff. I needed someone who didn't have kind of, personal interest, that wanted to speak at a conference or wanted to be. And I found that in Leslie and Leslie Parrott. And they were kind enough to sit with Chelsea and I. And so began the conversation. And as I remember it, Les, it was most of like all the things we were most afraid of and how I felt like I was minutes and moments away from doing the very thing that I had despised that some of my peers and friends and heroes had done. So it felt inevitable, Carey, which is humiliating to admit. And I needed someone that was skilled. And ultimately, I say all that to say, I wanted to write a book with my therapist because a lot of preachers or people like me that maybe aren't preachers, first of all, therapy's expensive. But second of all, where do I go? Who do I go to? Who do I call? I don't know. What if I just put it in a book form and said, here's all of my stuff. Here's what we went through. Here's what we processed. And perhaps it could start the cycle of relieving some of that inevitable feelings of doom and a sense of hopefulness. And if nothing else, Leslie looked at Chelsea and I do remember this feeling. And I remember feeling this overwhelming sense we're not crazy. We're not alone. This isn't insane. This is very normal. This is very real. You're going to make it through. We're going to help you. And that feeling alone, Carey, was like, man, it was like we had been holding our breath for weeks, and we finally got oxygen.
So, Judy, you said something in there that was interesting to me. You said therapy is expensive. We want to camp out on that just a minute, because I don't remember sending you an invoice yet after 15 years. So,
come on, it's cost me
now
everything.
Wait for your phone to blow up, Les. Come on.
It was free, Carey. I'm not going to lie. It was free, baby.
Wow.
I know how I would answer that question, Carey.
Yeah, I'd love, and you know what I love about the position that you and your wife sit in is you see patterns. Tony did family law for a while, and she can never disclose client information, never want her to, but like she would tell me patterns. Oh, when this happens, then this happens, and this happens. And you've met with, Judah and Chelsea, but obviously many other ministry leaders and leaders, and you get to see patterns as they develop, which I think is fascinating.
That is true. And it's an honor. It's a privilege to be able to do that. But you're right. You have to cloak that all in confidentiality, which is the unique thing with Judah. Judah's just out there.
Yeah, he is.
But when you think about the pressures in ministry, for me, the word that comes to mind is congruence. I think that is the biggest pressure that I feel in the kind of ministry. I don't have the traditional ministry of preaching at church every Sunday, but I sure preach in a lot of churches around the country and talk to a lot of pastors. But I do remember, Judah, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but Leslie and I, this was before we all had GPSs in our hands, and we were trying to find a church that we were giving a seminar at in Portland, Oregon. So we drove from our hometown in Seattle down to Portland, and we've had this script in our marriage before we all had the GPS system working in our favor. By the way, do you know the number of marital conflicts a simple GPS has resolved? Think back to the day.
Yeah.
Get in the left lane. I am in the left lane. But anyway, we're trying to find this church, and it got to the point because of this script that we've had for a long time and Leslie not helping me. And I grew up in a home where mom always did the navigating for dad in the car and had the maps out and all that kind of stuff. And Leslie just didn't see that modeled. And so it was frustrating to me. And anyway, we got to a point. Have either of you ever made your wives cry in the car?
Never. Not one.
Never.
Next question. Next question.
Yeah, next question,
more
please.
than once. Mm-hmm.
So Leslie is crying, and we're late to this event where we have several hundred people waiting for us in this sanctuary to talk about marriage.
So the experts are late, and the wife is crying.
Exactly. And we pull around this corner, and there's this huge billboard, and it's a picture of Leslie and me, and I'm holding her up in the air, and it's very romantic. And it says, "Becoming Soulmates with Doctors Les and Leslie Parrott." And here we are. I just made my wife
not talking to each other.
And the church is right there. And Leslie said, "Just keep driving." So that idea of being congruent, you think we went up to the platform and went, "Hey guys, we just had a big fight in our car on the way down here." Of course not. We have to put on a face and go through the motions when it just doesn't feel, congruent, doesn't feel genuine. That's the biggest kind of, I think, pressure for me, is that when you're on, you have to be on. And I think that's true for a lot of people in leadership that speak.
Judah, you and I were talking about pace over the years. And you had a certain point at which you had how many services midweek?
Well, I was averaging like 11
during the weekend,
sermons
whenever.
a week. Yeah, 11 sermons a week was average. Sometimes it was a bit more. It was a lot. It was a lot.
What did that feel like at the time?
Yeah, it felt like I was juggling 3, and then someone threw in 4, and then they were like, "Now we gotta go to the grocery store and get groceries." And it was like, wait, but I'm gonna still juggle this? Like, this is crazy. And yet I would call my mentors And I would say, and I've expressed kind of this story before, we were growing at a rate that we had prayed for, I guess. And it was like always like in my tradition, it was like revival. So, but every mentor I called, Carey, just kept telling me, start more services. So then I was like, wait, so nobody has a plan here. Like, wait, we haven't played this out that if like multi-site, multi-service. So wait a minute. It became apparent to me that nobody played this out to its extreme, meaning it wasn't sustainable. Like, because I did it. I added a bunch of buildings and services, and before I knew it, I felt like a caricature. I felt like a caricature. And I never wanted to be a pro speaker. I wanted to be this congruent human. Like, those were my heroes. My dad was one of the more congruent men that I knew. And the stories he would tell were real. They weren't really exaggerated. And like his love for Jesus was like, he cried about it on stage and off. And it was like a thing. And I thought that was attractive. And I bought into that. And suddenly I was in a space and I was in a delivery system where I couldn't, nobody's that spiritual. Nobody feels Jesus, that many times a week. Nobody has new content that much. Nobody is like praying enough to sustain 11 sermons. And in some cases, I would speak as many as 6 new ones a week. And it was just like, guys, I can't even be a human and prepare this much content. And so it got out of order and it got wonky. And I woke up one day not knowing what year it was and exactly what city I was in, and started calling friends of mine. And they said, man, you're close to a real physical, mental, emotional breakdown. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was right around that time we called Leslie, and a lot has changed since then. And I'm happy to announce that. And so far, so good. So.
What are some of the other frequent flyer issues you've seen, Les, in your work with leaders?
I love that question because it always gets me to have to think about the patterns that you mentioned. This one might surprise you, but honestly, I think it's lately a loss of imagination. And I know you're probably going, well, what about depression? What about anxiety? And all that stuff's there, but a loss of imagination. And the reason I say that, did you guys see that study by Parrott that showed that 70% of Christians feel discouraged about their future? 70%?
I did not. No.
So that's a big loss of vision, right? That like erodes hope. And so that's where I start. It's just, if you can't see, if you're not envisioning the future, you're in survival mode, right? And so I see that a lot. I see loneliness. It's off the charts. We all know that. It's predictable. Even in a crowded room or in full churches, we can feel lonely. And lots of pastors. I think it's the last 5-6 years, the level of loneliness for pastors has moved from like around low 40% to the mid 60% of reporting feeling frequently lonely. That's crazy, right? So that's a big one. And then the other one that comes to mind for me, Carey, is what I would just call a loss of relationship muscle, like the relational muscle that we need to be strong. It's just so easy to ghost, to scroll, to shut down, to move on, to avoid, to bury. And so it's emotional intelligence. I think that's the one that hurts my heart the most. And
I'm glad you raised relationship. We talk about it a lot on this podcast, but I was at 2 events. Obviously, we're regular partakers at our church, and I was there Sunday morning. But Sunday night, I was at an event in the community. It was small. It was like a tutorial in person. It was at a butcher shop. And I just wanted to learn more about meat because that's one of my hobbies. And there were like 12 of us who signed up for it. And what shocked me, and I had this at another, like a fitness meetup that I was at, again, not church events, but it was eerily silent. There's 12 of us standing in this small shop and nobody's talking to each other. And I'm like, oh, am I going to be the guy? And a couple of the guys brought their spouses and they weren't talking to each other. And so I quietly introduced myself to the owners. And then it was this weird, like awkward thing. And I've noticed that in other meetups I've had that are outside of the church that are small, nobody, like, we've lost that relational muscle. And I'm like, well, this is good news for the church, because I was at church Sunday morning and that we know how to talk to each other, which is awesome. But like, it is becoming like a real crisis.
Yeah. And it's a sense of, some researchers call it emotional blindness. We can't even identify our feelings to be able to talk about them. And so you can't go below the surface. You talk topically about the weather and the sports and what you watched on Netflix or whatever, but to talk about feelings, that's scary, right? Especially when you can't navigate them yourselves. And so that emotional intelligence within the church, I think, is still something that's a struggle. And you got to get clarity to do that. But do you know what this was a study that came out in, I think it was the Harvard Business Journal, that review that said the single most important question in a conversation. They identified it. This was a study. The single most important question in a conversation. Because we all start with what? What do you do? Right? Oh, I'm a lawyer. I own my own business, whatever the thing is. And then the single most important question, do either of you know?
How do you feel?
No, it's a good one though, Judah. It's the follow-up question. The follow-up question.
Wow, I love that.
Just to follow up with that. Do you enjoy being a lawyer? I bet you was that your dream? Anything to follow up on it.
So good.
That is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise we just move into, oh yeah, I have a cousin who's a lawyer, or I wanted to be a lawyer, and we we don't even ask.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what you want to do, I don't know if you guys ever read that book by David, How to Know a Person.
David Brooks?
Yeah, David Brooks.
Podcast alumni. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved his book on how to know a person. And he talks about illuminating another person. How do you illuminate someone? And by the way, as an aside, I'll do a little name drop here. Well, maybe I shouldn't even do that. But I called a well-known pastor who I went to seminary with. And
well, now we're all wondering.
Okay, John Ortberg. I'll just put it out.
Oh, John. Yeah.
And I said to John, hey, I just read this book. I said, I'm in a small group with some other guys. They're terrible at illuminating me. I need somebody. And John, he's a psychologist as well as a pastor. And I said, I need somebody to illuminate me. Would you do that? He said, yes. It was the most selfish phone call I've ever made. But, it's something that we just don't get many places, And so, yeah, those are the frequent flyer issues that I see, Carey.
Thank you for that. And Judah, you said something, and I forget the exact phrasing, but you said that sort of the pull toward moral failure just seemed inevitable. And the way you saw it, it's not witchcraft. It's just the monotony, the boredom, the lack of imagination, all of those things. But you said, with a bad decision that would hurt most the people I love or something like that, I'd like for either of you, both of you, to break that down a little bit. How does that happen? Yeah, because, I think it's easy on the outside looking in to say, so-and-so decided to become a bad person, or was never sincere in the first place, or, is just diabolical or possessed by a demon or whatever. We make it so unnormal that we don't see ourselves as possibly falling into the same trap. And I'd love for you to kind of explain a little bit more of what you saw or what you felt.
Well, I actually have a story, and we will not share the name, but peer of mine.
I shared my name. Come on,
pastor
buddy.
friend. No, I definitely can't share this name, but as a pastor friend, and I remember Les was the first person I had ever heard describe this. I was frustrated with their course of action and a decision that they had made that was very public. And I said to Les, I don't get it. Why would this isn't what's best for the community. It was confusing. It was frustrating. It was agitated, whatever. And Les goes, oh, that's easy. That's sabotage. That's a leader that can't keep it up. Can't keep up the presentation, the pretense, the pressure. Can't keep it up. And so they're going to now sabotage it so that they have a way to get out. And so the church went from this massive thing growing, and then it didn't.
Wow.
And I remember feeling that way to Les, like, this is gonna breed mistrust. It's gonna be frustrating and confusing. And Les was like, oh yeah, well, that's that leader's way of getting out from under the pressure. And I think that story and example exemplifies to me what I didn't know when I was younger. I thought guys just had a sex problem.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought guys had a cheating problem, a lying problem, a greed problem. Now I think more often than not, it's just a pressure problem. And it's a Messiah complex. And they think that they hold the world up. And a friend of mine out of the blue said, I was praying for you today, and God told me to tell you that you have quite misplaced being needed and known. You think the more people need you, the more you're known, but the two are not the same. And God told me to tell you that. And I was like, well, that's frustrating because it's so accurate and true. It's annoying. I think if I can be needed, I'm needed as the preacher, I'm needed as the man of God, then people know me and I'm known and and they're not the same thing, are they? And I know that feeling of you despise the pressure, but secretly you love it because you feel necessary and needed. So it's this real sadistic razor edge thing that you live on because you kind of get addicted to the fact that everybody needs your gift or what you bring. And then you go home and kind of despise it, kind of like the frustrated artist, because like people have no idea how hard it is to be me. And it's this whole like weird selfish cycle that you go through. And I tell you this, I knew I wanted out of that because that wasn't getting me anywhere but nowhere good. So
wow.
That's some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, and I've said this to you before too, Judah, that most guys don't suffer from a moral failure. They suffer from a meaning failure.
Oof.
And they lose their why in ministry because of the things you were just talking about. And so they minister with this functional, sometimes very high functioning emptiness inside. And
Wow.
that is just, you're skating on the edge when you do that. It's a dangerous place to be, but
how do you lose your why? How does that happen?
You lose your why?
Yeah.
By doing the very things that Judah's talking about. You realize that life is lived on a pedestal, and I gotta keep this performance up and make sure the lighting is good because boy, I got a sermon today. And it just becomes this kind of ego centric, continual treadmill of feeding that to where you feel that kind of pressure that Judah just described, and your why is gone. I think isn't it something like 70% of pastors read the Bible only to preach it? Like
I've heard stats like that. Yeah.
It's higher than that.
We just don't feed our soul. You know what I mean? In leadership, because Judah, come on, that's an extreme example. Did you say 11 preaching events in a week? That's a suicide mission, right? And so you're most of us don't do it at that level that Judah was talking about, but we still have this treadmill to do that. And so that's where our why goes out the window. It's just like performance.
This episode is brought to you by the Art of Leadership Academy. So as you are listening to this episode, as you know, you have about 60,000 thoughts today. 80% of them are negative. No wonder so many leaders feel discouraged, stuck, and honestly, just in need of encouragement. They feel alone. And that's one of the reasons I love the Art of Leadership Academy. It's an online community for pastors and leaders to grow together and to learn from peers and to go through leadership with each other, right? With leaders who are like-minded. When you join, You will get access to the show notes for this episode, including all the important links, the full transcript, my top insights, and the steps you can put into action right away. Plus, there's a thread where you can chat about each podcast episode with other listeners, and I really enjoy that one. Conversations are actually really good. So it's totally free to join, no credit card required, and it only takes a couple of minutes to get started. Just click the link in the description of this episode or go to theartofleadershipacademy.com. So if you're ready to stop leading alone and join a vibrant community of church leaders, we have over 12,000 now. I'd love to see you inside. Click the link in the description of this episode and you can join today. If you're, because I think what you're speaking into is real. But we drop 6 podcast episodes a month, plus I travel and I speak and I write and I'm working on a book. And for the most part, it's enjoyable. I have days that are not enjoyable, but most part, it's pretty enjoyable. What is the key, whether you have, 3 sites or 30 sites or, 11 messages or 2 services or whatever it is? We all in leadership end up, and I'm thinking about a CEO friend right now who's not leading in the church at all. But I mean, the pressure he's under makes my job feel like a vacation compared to the treadmill that he's on. So I guess where I'm going with this question is, we can probably all think of some leaders who are leading multiple services, multiple campuses, maybe not 11, but a few, who seem to be bearing up well under the pressure. And you've recalibrated your life, Judah, to bear up much better under the pressure. How do you do that without just going, I'm doing 1 service a month and just phoning it in? Like is there a way to keep up the impact and the scale, but also not lose your soul?
And I think this is what I love. I'll respond. And I love the feeling that Les is here, because maybe this is why we make a good team, because I'm going to share some feelings and some emotions and then some not biblical theological interpretation, but some application that has been life to me. And then what I love about Les is his ability to go, well, actually research shows, and we've learned kind of in our studies, and it's a great team. And perhaps it's why I had the idea that maybe we could put a book together and it was a preacher and a shrink, walk into your brain. But I do enjoy that journey. And of course, we're both from Seattle, so we're wild and crazy because we're West Coast for life, baby. But, us West Coasters are crazy.
Needle, man.
Yeah, we're crazy. Okay, so here's what I noticed in my life. There's this scripture in the Bible, and I'm just going to apply it. I'm not going to interpret it. The traditions of men make the story of God not effective anymore. The Bible becomes elevator music. The New Testament becomes white noise. It becomes this rhetoric. It becomes this routine. Becomes lifeless. What is tradition? What is tradition? Tradition is routines, delivery systems, programs, processes, none of which is inherently bad, but they become this mindless thing we do, this soulless activity that we do. And ultimately, we justify it and quantify it with things like sacrifice. I'm doing this for the people. I'm laying down my life. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, you begin to develop this idea that, I know that I'm a starving baker. I know that I'm cooking up all these meals and I don't eat myself, but it's in the name of ministry, mission, mandate. I'm doing this. This is awesome. And I know right now, listening to this podcast, there are dozens of men and women, and I'm talking to you. You know exactly what this feels like. And it might be 11 sermons a week. It might be 11 sermons a year, but you can become a professional. You can give into the routine and the tradition. And what gets lost in all of this, and here to me is the thing that you got to look out for. You are not curious anymore. You aren't curious anymore. You're not curious when you read your Bible. You're not asking yourself things like, what would this mean? I wonder why Paul wrote that. Who's receiving? The stuff that got us all into this work. I was curious as a kid. My daughter last night on our front lawn, I'm sitting out there and the crickets are cricketing and we're doing our thing. And I said, who do you want to most be like? She goes, I don't have anybody. I said, you got to have somebody, baby. When I was 13, I wanted to be Bishop T.D. Jakes. She said, why, Dad? And I told her why, because I loved how he delivered the story and I loved how it affected culture and I loved his journey and I loved his story. And I felt someday I could be an emotional deliverer of the gospel and people could weep and we could cry and I could hold people and we would have meetings and it would be amazing. And I was so curious about helping people and reaching culture. And So she came up with somebody, but there's that buzz. There's that thing that's like a twinge inside of you that's like, ooh, I love this life. Ooh, I'm so curious of what could happen. Like people say, like, we like when you preach. And when I'm really in a healthy state, my response is, so do I. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say next. Like, it's going to be so fun. Like, this is going to be crazy. I lost that. I lost being curious about people. Here's the biggest thing. If you're going to be in the people business like we are, when you stop being curious about people, whatever you do, stop what you're doing and go get help by all means necessary and through the grace of God. Because if you stop being curious about people, it's so wild. Let's say the follow-up question. Because man, if we are not the people that do the follow-up questions, who is? Like this is, we're about to be, the mission is people. The point is people. The purpose is people. The prize is people. And I forgot it was about people and I became a pro, Carey. And I lost my curiosity. I wasn't curious about what could happen in the room. I wasn't curious about who was in the room. And I wasn't curious anymore about what the story of God was all about. And I started reading verses like I had read them before. I started listening to Bible stories like I'd heard it a dozen times. And I wasn't listening with fresh eyes and fresh ears. So if somebody out there right now says to themselves, okay, I think I'm in a traditional routine. I've lost my curiosity. How do I cultivate that curiosity? Okay. I don't know if this is scientifically proven, unless it's about to tell us. But here's what I always do. I go reconnect. I go reconnect to the essence of it all. And here's what I mean. Yesterday, and I won't cry, I promise. Someone comes backstage after our once a month service in Bellevue. And they said, there's a family here who has a young boy who's got cancer and they want you to pray for him. And I just want to be very clear. I was the one blessed. I was the one getting the gift, not this family. God was ministering to me. And I said, of course. We walk out to the lobby and here's this family that's been in our church for quite some time. And their 11-year-old son's been facing terminal cancer since he was 3. He hugged me. His parents said, you're his hero. And I almost felt, you know how you feel humble, but then sometimes you just feel humiliated? Like I felt humiliated by my own self-absorbed little bubble that I live in. And I'm holding this baby boy and I'm hugging his mom and dad. And it's like, oh God. You know what's crazy, guys? That sweet family don't care about how many books less than I sell. They don't care about all the podcasts. And I'm not saying any of that's wrong, but it's wild when you connect to why you got into this in the first place. And you have those sacred, holy moments where God kind of rips your heart open and he says, isn't this what you wanted? Like to serve real people facing real stuff and not become a pro preacher who's trying to push Instagram hits and views and podcast numbers. And all I can say is I have gone out of my way at times. And out of my way, I mean, it's my privilege and honor to go sit with somebody that doesn't know Jesus. I sat with my son's new college basketball teammates. You know, Carey, I met him in the lobby of our church on Sunday. And the first question these 2 young men asked me, they said, what's your name? I said, I'm Judah. That didn't resonate. I said, I'm Elliot's dad. They said, oh yeah, what's up, man?
That's the best, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean? It's like you reconnect again with real life people. Like there's real people out there who are just trying to live and make it through another day. And I think that's our cause. And I think that's our mandate. So that was a whole sermon. That's what I do. Les, please fix that.
Well, before I go to you, Les, can I throw one more thing in the waters? So I was at a business conference last year, and it was a tough week. I wasn't feeling 100%. And, you know, my team was asking me, some of my team members were there, how have you enjoyed this week? I said, well, it's not bad. But I said, you know, I was in the pool in the afternoon because we were off and there were a lot of other leaders there, but they were business leaders. And I said, nobody really came up and asked me any questions or anything. And my son, who was with me, looked at me and he goes, welcome to the rest of humanity. He says, of course, people don't know your name. Like, if you're me, you got to go do the work. And I was in such a bubble where I'm just in most of the rooms I show up. People know who I am. I always introduce myself, but I don't need to. And they always have a million questions. Then I was in a place where nobody knew who I was and I was supposed to interact. And it was so embarrassing and stupefying and grounding and real. But like we get in our heads, right? Like we get in our heads. So comment on all of that lesson and fix us.
Well, I love that, Judah, that you camped out on curiosity. Curiosity is what connects us. And our oldest sons, and we have two boys, and one boy is in graduate school outside of Los Angeles, and he is studying curiosity. He's getting a PhD in positive psychology, which is basically a PhD in the fruit of the spirit. It's what goes right with people. I'm a clinical psychologist. We study what goes wrong with people. Positive psychology studies what goes right with people. And so he's doing his dissertation on curiosity. So I hear more about curiosity than the average bear because of that. And I joked with John, my son John, a little while ago, and I said, "Man, I need to call you whenever I can't quite fall asleep, because if I can get you talking about curiosity, I will zone out so fast." He is so deep into it. But one of the things I've learned from him is that curiosity is the on-ramp to empathy. And empathy changes everything. And Judah, you just gave a perfect example of that with that family backstage, by being able to see the world from their perspective because you were curious. You can't get there. You can't get to curiosity. I mean, you can't get to empathy without curiosity. And empathy is, of course, that capacity to see the world from somebody else's perspective, but it's not. I always tell my counseling students, huge difference between sympathy and empathy. And every pastor is really good at sympathy, right? Sympathy is throwing out a life ring to somebody that's struggling in the water. And everybody in ministry does that because that's what we're supposed to do, and it's easy, right? Empathy, much more challenging. That's diving into the water, risking your own well-being to bring that person back to shore. And not everybody does that. In fact, it's so rare. What do we call those people? Heroes, right? And it's just as heroic when we do that in leadership, as a pastor, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend. It's just one of those things that goes against the grain of human nature to enter that person's world, to accurately understand it. But you can't get to it without curiosity. So I loved hearing that story, Judah. That's incredible.
So good.
Super helpful. Well, let's dive into the book a little bit. Bad Thoughts. First of all, love the title. Could have been way more complicated, just like bad thoughts. We all have them. What was the moment you each realized that you had to take seriously the stuff that goes on in your head? Because I think sometimes there can be a divide between, well, this is what I think, but it's not really showing up in the rest of my life. But, bad thoughts are something I think we all struggle with. What was that moment for you where you realized we gotta take some action around this?
Well, I was going to say the reason we focused on this is because in our work together as a preacher and a shrink, is that we just, when Judah said, "Hey, would you ever," we've done some work for a number of years. And he said, "I'd like to put some of this in a book. People need to kind of experience this with us." And I said, "That means pulling back the curtain, Judah. That means like being vulnerable, authentic with what's going on in your life. Are you sure you want to do that?" And he said, "Yeah. Have you listened to one of my sermons yet? That's what I." And so it just made sense to kind of put this together in a way that had a hook that was most relevant. And that hook, the kind of the theme that we saw running through our work together was that you are what you think. And so much of what happens in our life is the result of not how we feel, not what just happened, but how we think about what just happened, because that's where the feelings come from. They're the caboose that follows the thought. And so that's what got us to this place. And Judah, I'll let you speak more to it, but that is, I will say this, and Judah knows this because he's heard me say it a million times. The Cleveland Clinic did this massive study on how many thoughts we have on average in a day. 60,000 thoughts per day, the average individual has. And in fact, before I even tell you how they categorize the thoughts, let me do a little thought exercise with both of you and all of our listeners. If you could take a little computer chip out of the back of your head and slip it into your laptop before you fall asleep tonight, and it would tabulate your internal dialogue, your thought life into either positive thoughts or negative thoughts, which side of the scale would be heaviest? Positive thoughts or negative thoughts? Either of you want to answer that? Here's what we know.
Not publicly.
Yeah, I understand. None of us would. But the Cleveland Clinic found that 80% on average, for the average person, 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes. 80% of our thoughts are bad thoughts. And when your mind gets hijacked with bad thoughts, it impacts your soul. It impacts your relationships. It impacts your ministry. It impacts everything. The stakes couldn't be higher. And so anyway, that's what really got Judah and me to go, let's somehow figure out how to put the cookies on the bottom shelf, make this accessible. And by the way, Carey, one of the things that we've done in this book, as you know, is every chapter has this little self-test, because we're not just interested in staying on a platform and preaching to you about it. We want to make sure this is relevant to your life. So we hold up a mirror, allow you to enter into one of the, of these 5 toxic thoughts. How relevant is it to your life? And, but that was the genesis of the whole thing. Is that the way you remember it too, Judah?
Every word, actually, even the Cleveland study. Yeah, that's everything I was going to say to a T.
Okay.
No, but this was the dream. I mean, Carey, this was literally the dream, and it is a dream to be on your podcast. And I hope you know. I was gonna make that dumb statement. You know how much I love you, but it's like, does anyone actually know? But I do. I love you and Tony so much, and admire you, and I'm so grateful to be your friend, and so grateful that you continue to trust God even through all the chapters and iterations and seasons, and even some of the challenges you're facing right now. You continue to be that person in my life that is a constant source of, hey, let's keep going, let's trust God, let's be who He's called us to be. And so I thank you for that.
Mutual.
This was the dream, though, to partner with Les. And in my line of work, I've worked with a lot of emo preachers and presenters and communicators, and it's all awesome, and I love them, and that's who I am. But man, I needed, an incredible gift like Les Parrott, who could say, hey, but guys, this actually lines up with all the research and all the data and all the science and all the study says this is what happens. I'll say this. I'll tell you one little story that indicates how profoundly thought life had affected my decorum and my behavior and my action. I'm sitting in Les's office with Chelsea, and I've told this story before, but it's so indicative, because it's also like some of you have been thinking thoughts for so long that you're not even cognizant of it anymore, but it is affecting your approach to big things. In the case, my approach to attractive, beautiful women. Now, if you would have caught me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and said, hey, you have a problem with attractive women, I'd be like, well, no, I don't. I'm committed to my wife. I'm not, no. You have a problem with attractive women. I would be like, what do you, no, I, by the grace of God, I don't. Like, I'm attracted to women, don't get me wrong, but like, no, I don't. There was a point. We were in deep discussion. I don't know how we got there, so for sake of time, I'll just jump right to it. But Les says to me, in front of Leslie and Chelsea, Judah, when you see a beautiful woman, what either goes through your mind and what do you experience? And in real time, Carey, I dropped my head, unbeknownst to me, I dropped my head and went like this. And Les goes, hold on a second. Look what just happened. I literally said attractive woman, and your head just dropped, telling me that around that idea of dealing with temptation or beauty or sexiness, you have shame. And he literally then asked, which is so humiliating, he said, do you believe that acknowledging a beautiful woman is a sin? And I was quiet, as if to say, I think so. I think that.
Even noticing. Mm-hmm.
Judah's
Yeah,
getting
even
down
though
to
like
it now.
even though if someone asked me, I would have never said yes to that. And it was like there was a thought pattern in my life that had carried over, probably because of some shrapnel and some trauma and some drama, that even the acknowledging of like, I don't mean that my brain doesn't go, wow, that woman's beautiful, of course, but like acknowledging, Les literally said, acknowledging that someone is beautiful is not a sin. And I know that might sound trite and simple. And Judah, what's the big idea? It's that we have developed thought patterns. I think we say bad thoughts, and a lot of people go, I don't think I have bad thoughts. And what I think they're saying is, I actually have a thoughtless thought life. I don't even think about what I'm thinking. And by the way, here I had developed a pattern of shame, but I hadn't even thought about what I was thinking about when I came across a beautiful woman. But obviously, I was trying to look away, but there was shame connected to something as simple and everyday as that. And it was Les that helped me uncover that. And so we talk about shame in the book. We talk about entitlement in the book. We talk about getting off your high horse in the book. And frankly, all of these are my bad thoughts. And this is how Les fixed them. And the next book we're going to do is how I fix Les Parrott. I'm very excited about that.
I can't wait for that book, and I hope you're the one that's going to write it for us. So that'll be awesome.
So what is a healthier framing? Because I think that's a really good thing. Do you notice attractive women, or what response do you have to attractive women? What is a healthier response to that, Les?
Well, I'll tell you what Les told me because it changed my life, and that is Chelsea and I in our marriage now, we'll actually verbalize it. Particularly if it's something that's prevalent to us, we'll be like, wow, she is beautiful. And Chelsea will be like, she really is. Or wow, he is so handsome. Last night we were watching a show and we hated like one of the main characters who was a male. And I said, but he is handsome, isn't he? And Chelsea's like, yeah, he's handsome. And we just chuckle. And it's become such a healthy front street kind of approach. Les, I don't know if that's what you told me to do, but I think it is. And that's what we've been doing.
That's exactly right, because we're always afraid to name something. But when we name it, it loses control. Mm-hmm. It's control over us, right? We're putting a spotlight on it. It's no longer in the shadows. And so by naming it, we're going, hey, no, there's nothing private here. There's nothing secretive that I'm harboring about whatever this thing is. It doesn't have to just be attractive people. It's whatever it is. It could be sports. It can be whatever it is. But naming it. Remember when I talked about how I see one of the frequent flyer issues of being a lack of emotional muscle, and that's what I'm getting at, is it's a lack of even awareness sometimes. Like Judah, I love your story and the vulnerability of that and authenticity of that, Judah. But what Judah was not even aware of it. And I'm sure you're so tired of me saying this, Judah, but because I say it so frequently to everybody in a therapeutic setting, but awareness is curative. Awareness is curative. You can't do something about it until you become aware of it. And we just tend to not want to acknowledge it. We don't name it, and therefore we don't have to do anything about it.
I would love to know, you outline 5 bad thoughts or main ways of thinking in the book. And I took the assessment and got nailed on a couple. Is one of you comfortable outlining the 5 primary ways you sort of are bad thoughts unfold, and then maybe explain a little bit of each of them? Because I think most of us are going to get owned in one of these, or 2, or 3.
I'll jump into this, Judah. It wasn't just like, hey, I loved how, Judah, you said a moment ago, hey, this is a book about my 5 bad thoughts, and like it's a biography or something. It's everybody's biography.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is not just one guy's story. And in fact, what we did, and we talk about this in the introduction, we surveyed a bunch of people to find out, these are the 5 toxic thoughts. We started with a longer list than 5, but got it down to these 5 that are so salient, that are so common. And the first chapter is Take Your Last Guilt Trip. It's all about guilt and discovering grace. And guilt is, we're so good at guilt in the church. It's almost like that's just one of the fruit of the Spirit, right? Guilty. And it's such a self-centered emotion. When we're experiencing guilt, it's like having a toothache. And we can pretend we're interested in somebody else or something else, but the whole time we're just thinking, oh my goodness, how do I get rid of this toothache? Guilt is the same kind of pain. It's just, it clouds our capacity to see. We talked about empathy. You can't empathize with somebody else if you're carrying around a backpack filled with guilt because you're consumed with yourself, right? So that's the first one. Carey, we can talk all day about each one of these, but that's the first one, right?
All right, second one.
Judy, you want to go for the second one?
No, you outline all 5 of them. Come on, you're the doctor, and then I'll jump in. Come on, man.
The second one is the disease to please.
To please. That's my problem.
This was a big one for you, Judo, wasn't it?
I'm telling you, Les is being nice. This is all of my problems out for everybody. This is me and my shrink saying, I'm a nightmare. Somebody come help me. Oh, wait, Les is. Yeah. I thought pleasing people was a calling. I thought it was like synonymous with mission. I thought it was like, you are called by God to please everyone. That is what being a pastor is. And it became so ingrained in my thought patterns, in my lifestyle. It became incredibly toxic and destructive. And by the grace of God, I avoided, decisions that would ruin everything. But I was addicted to pleasing. I needed to be needed. And my personality is I want to win with everybody. And when I don't win with somebody, I get so myopic and obsessive about it. It could be like someone literally driving by on the freeway that I wave at and they don't wave back. I'm like, hey, what come on, what's the deal? I mean, it's so symptomatic of someone who's got a big problem.
We spent a lot of time in our work together helping Judah to formulate a single word that's very difficult for him to say. It's 2 letters. Do you remember what the word is, Judah? Starts with an N and it ends with an O. Come on, you can say it.
Is it on? No.
If you're dyslexic.
Dyslexic, yeah, a little bit.
I'm on, yeah. But it really is. The disease to please is it kind of goes part and parcel for a lot of folks in leadership ministry because that's what we feel. We're people pleasers. Right? We want to help people, and it kind of bleeds into that. Here's the problem with people pleasing. It creates a veneer of relationships that are only an inch deep. And you cannot go deep with someone when you're trying to please them because what you really want is for them to like you. That's what fuels the disease to please. Please like me. And if you want someone to like you, you never show your dark side. You never show your shadow self. And therefore, all they're liking is whatever it is you've managed to present. We often call it impression management. And so if that's all you're putting out to the world, you never really feel secure in being known and loved and accepted because no one really knows you. They just know that presentation of you, the mask that you wear. And so anyway, that's the disease to please.
Okay, I want to get through them because I want people to hear and see themselves in the story. I definitely saw myself in the story. I'll tell you what. Okay, number 3.
Number 3 is what we call extinguish self-doubt and rekindle your courage. Now, that's a close cousin to the disease to please, but it is distinct, right? Self-doubt, because, when we don't stand, there's this thing in psychology we term the internal locus of control versus external locus of control.
Yeah.
And when our life is run by external things, it's controlled by the outside. It's whatever you set my agenda to be. We're not standing on truth, right? We're just floating. We're just and so when you have the courage to be who you are, that gets back to congruence, right? To be able to not just present something that you think people would like, but to actually present the real you and be congruent with that and show it in a way that also illustrates redemption, by the way, because that's where that's found. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about this extinguishing your self-doubt. Judah, you want to amplify on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, I have so many personal stories and so many moments where this was just surfacing in my life. And I'm just, I'll spare us the details and the time, but can I just say, like, I really am excited. I've read this book multiple times. gone over it, and I just feel like I lived this book, unfortunately. And I'm like, wait,
Carey,
Les, this is not
let
original
me interrupt you
content.
for a second, Judah. You know that saying about writers that writing is simple. You just sit in front of your keyboard and bleed. And I did most of the bleeding on this book.
You did not. I did all the hemorrhaging, and you just used the blood to write the words.
I was going to say you came in with a transfusion every once in a while, but
It's my blood you used, okay?
Well, you doodled in the margins, Judah. Your art is
That's
amazing.
right. That was my major contribution.
If you read the book, you will see exactly what I mean. It's quite amusing. I've never seen that before.
Yeah,
I
we
love
joke about it. And I had that idea and I presented it to Judah. I said, and it's kind of Carey in this book, it really is true that Judah brings the sermon and I bring the science. And so when we did this, I didn't want it to feel like this, heavy book. It's not. It's super accessible.
It doesn't. No.
But I said, Judah, I know people would love just to hear your internal commentary on some of this stuff. Why don't you just do, he doodles a lot and he's an incredible artist. I said, just put some of that in the margins of this book. Let's see if HarperCollins will make the margins bigger for you.
And they did. It's pretty cool.
They did. And I'm telling you, we had some lively sessions late at night, well past midnight, as we were working all that through. But
4 and 5 got me, and I know we're going to wrap soon, but 4 and 5 really got me. So what are 4 and 5?
So
I was
4.
upset that they got me, by the way.
Number 4 is step off your high horse and walk in another shoes. We're getting back to
and we're out of time. Okay.
This is all about entitlement. And this was the chapter we didn't know whether we should include or not, because the people that need this chapter are not likely to read this chapter. Do you know what I mean? We all have blind spots and people that feel entitled. And so it had to begin with us. It had to begin with Judah and with me. And I'll be the first to admit, I feel like the most entitled person in the world sometimes, especially when I'm traveling.
How does that show up, Les? Because I would say, if you ask me, is Carey entitled? Most people would say no, but my wife would say, 100% yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's our knee-jerk reaction is, oh, no, I'm not entitled. That's other people that struggle with that.
Yeah.
Just get on an airplane with me. I want to make sure I'm at the front of the line. I need to make sure I get in that seat. Man, I've traveled 1 million miles on this airlines. I deserve some special attention here. You know what I mean? So here's what I do when I get on an airplane these days. I am so conscientious of other travel. Now, I still jockey for my position because I earned that and I get on the airplane. But when I'm on there, I'm so conscientious of other travelers. And I will always help somebody put up their bag or whatever. And I have to do that for my own spiritual discipline, really, to step out of my entitled mindset. So that's a really tiny example, Carey, but that's at the level that we live, right? And so we all have that to some degree or another.
Jude, any comment on that?
I feel entitled to people's reciprocation to my kindness. I want people to ask for forgiveness. I want people to apologize. I want people to own their stuff because I feel like I do. And I'm not entitled to any of it. And I have noticed that trend in my life. There's a lot of recent stories that'll tell you that. And I just feel like, hey, I'll often be the guy that'll be like, hey, will you forgive me for, and then guess what I feel entitled to? Their moment.
Yes, I do. I forgive you. And if that doesn't come, got it.
And I'm all worked up about it.
Let me just brag on my friend Judah for a quick second, because this is a fresh story and I'm going to shorten it. And it's your story to tell, Judah. But this is such a great example of that. Judah was in his car with his family, and there was some news about somebody that kind of came around to kind of find Jesus in a new way, and they were celebrating that. And Judah's attitude was like, yeah, but the guy never did apologize. And so it kind of brought the whole car down. And I'm zipping through this story, Judah, for interest of time. But Judah, what did he do? He became aware of what just happened. Awareness is curative, right? He became aware of what just happened, and he said, you know what? That is not something I deserve. He will, apologize if and when he ever wants to, but he recognized that entitlement, like a pickpocket, came along and just slipped joy right out of his pocket, slipped it right out of that car, slipped it right out of that family, and instead acknowledged it and flipped it around. And Judah,
Entitlement does steal joy. You're so right.
It does.
Yeah, it really does.
Wow. Okay, we got to hit number 5. And then...
All right, this is a big one. And I think it's big for every Christian leader, truly. We preach it, but do we internalize it? Do you feel it deep down in your bones? It's this: quit earning credit with God and receive his gift of love.
Okay, so something like 50% of the respondents to your poll said they never struggled with it. And then 20% or whatever was occasional. And I was that minority that's like, no, I am still earning my salvation. I promise you, I am.
Yeah.
Working it out, man. I don't believe that, but...
Right.
It's akin to that kid. I remember being in Chicago once and speaking at some conference in this hotel, and I was just went away to get regrouped for the next presentation. I was sitting in this little cafe, and I could see through a glass partition to this swimming pool. And I saw a scene that's been repeated countless times. You've both seen it. You've probably both lived it, where the dad was on a business trip. He's sitting over there fully clothed in his suit or whatever, and he's looking at a paper or reading a magazine or a book. And his little boy that's with dad on a business trip is over on the edge of the pool, and he's looking at dad. And do you know what he's saying? Daddy, daddy,
look at me,
watch me, watch me, watch me. The father pulls down the book. The kid jumps in the pool. Oh, that's great, son. Good jump. Way to go. Right back to reading the book. What's the kid do? Gets back out of the pool, goes to the exact same place, looks at his dad. What does he say? Daddy, daddy, watch me, watch me. We do the same thing in our relationship with God over and over, even though intellectually we know we don't need to do this, because I just preached a sermon last Sunday on grace, but we still are trying to figure out, how do I earn my worth with God? Judah, have you ever felt that way?
No, but thanks for bringing that up. I never struggled with that at all.
Pastors aren't allowed to limp, so they keep it all hidden.
That's right.
But that's a quiet struggle for a lot of pastors.
Well, we live in a cause and effect world, and so it's so easy to make God a high school football coach, who will play us if we practice hard. And make the blocks and make the passes and don't fumble. And so we superimpose that on God.
Yeah, and if we don't, we're off the team.
That's it.
Fumble too many times and you're gone. Yeah. No, it was something I was starting to work on in my own personal spiritual life and my devotions. And then, I was picked up the book to prep for this interview, and I'm like, oh, stop reading my mail. Like, it's such a gift. It really is.
I love that.
You know what, Judah, you got to get your house remodeled or something and then get off to a special destination with Chelsea. But guys, we could have talked about this for like 5 hours. This was awesome. And I guess the conversation is to be continued as people pick up your book. It's a really complicated title, Bad Thoughts. Love it. Love it. It is a sincerely, and if you've read, I was saying to you guys before, if you read Winning the War in Your Mind or Max Lucado's Taming Your Thoughts, those are both excellent books, but this is a fresh take. And if most of us have 60,000 thoughts a day and 80% of them are negative, probably worth another take at this. And it's a beautiful blend. You guys wrote really well together. And in another universe, I would ask you, how did you do it? Because it is both fun, enjoyable, interesting, and researched, which is a rare combination. But I think you probably picked up on the dynamics in this conversation over the last hour and a bit. So anyway, I highly recommend the book. Think you should get it. Available everywhere. Anywhere else you want to direct people to websites, Instagram, wherever you happen to be, TikTok?
Well, people can find Les and Leslie at the place you would imagine, lesandleslie.com. So
Awesome.
lesandleslie.com, we have everything there. I will mention one other thing, Carey, that I'm so excited about, and I'm going to just put this out there with no explanation. If somebody wants a free little tool to assess the state of their relationship right now, go to myheartchart.com.
Myheartchart.com. Okay.
Myheartchart.com. It'll take you 4 minutes, and I'm super excited about that. I want to come back on your podcast sometime later and tell you why I'm so passionate about that. But
that's a deal.
myheartchart.com.
That's a deal, Les. And we're out to dinner. I was supposed to go for dinner. Tony and I were going to go for dinner with you and Leslie, and then I ended up in the hospital, but that's a rain check.
Yeah, but did you really, or was that just kind of a good?
It was,
come
we had to get lights and action and all the makeup and everything. But yeah, it was a nice fake. It was a deep fake. It was a deep fake. Judah, how about you? Where are people connecting with you as
Carey,
you head
can
offline?
find me on the golf course,
Exactly.
mostly in the Western Hemisphere. Yeah, you can locate me there. I'm constantly had my best score 2 days ago. I'm very excited
Did you
about
really?
that.
Congrats, dude.
But I'm, I guess I'm on Instagram and all that stuff. But
So you're retiring and
yeah.
going pro. Excellent.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah.
That
yeah.
is the goal.
We have a little church home app. Check it out. Church home 1H. Looks like church home. And every day we'll do a guided prayer with you and we'll help you follow Jesus. You can download that if you want to. But ultimately, I love you both. And Carey, I'm so happy that you let us do this with you today.
Yeah,
I'm
this was
so
super
grateful
fun.
too. Love you guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, this was really, really helpful.